So there is a lot going on with you at once. I almost don't know where to begin, but I guess it doesn't matter where we begin because it's kind of all connected. Like a lot of things are happening for you at once. Sinematic just came out. You have the Irishman movie, the band documentary, Once We Were Brothers, and they all sort of tie in together. It seems like you're in a real prolific period right now.
Yeah, it is one of those when it rains it pours times, I guess. In such a good way right now, and it wasn't planned, but because I was working on all these different projects at the same time, and usually you try to keep this one over here and that one over there, and in this case, I just opened my arms and I invited them all in, and a lot of it comes out in the songs on Sinematic, this record, the new record. So I really enjoyed the idea of embracing everything, and some of the music on this record is in the documentary Once We're Brothers. The song Once We're Brothers is in this record. And there's also this piece that I did called Remembrance that is in The Irishman. And the first track on here called I Hear You Paint Houses I did with Van Morrison.
Which is amazing.
And that's the book that The Irishman was based on, was called that. And it's a mob expression.
What does I Hear You Paint Houses mean?
Do you really want to know?
That's why I asked.
It's an expression in the mob of somebody going to a person that they know will kill somebody if need. They'll take out somebody. In the mob world, you know what I mean? It's business, right? So, and they will say to somebody, which they do in The Irishman, and they say, I heard you paint houses. And the guy, if he's willing to take the job, will say, yes, I do.
I almost feel like there could be a misunderstanding, though. Like someone could just really want to get their house painted a new color, and I feel like that would be like a mob conflict.
They understand.
They understand.
They understand.
So how did that Van Morrison duet collaboration come about? How did he get involved with the track?
He's an old friend of mine, and when he comes to Los Angeles, we usually catch up, we hang out, and I was working on the music for The Irishman, and he was saying, well, what are you doing? You know, what's going? So he came by my studio, and I played him this track that I was just writing, and he said, God, I like that. And I said, you want to sing on it with me? And he said, yeah. And so we just did it, and I love that. I love when things happen like that.
It was that simple.
It was that terrific that, you know, after all these years and everything, we did it. And we worked years ago on a track together for Martin Scorsese's The King of Comedy. We did a piece for that. So it's been a while since we've done this. And we just felt we need to do this again.
So obviously you and Martin, or you probably call him Marty, you guys are close. You and Martin Scorsese have worked together on, how many films is it now, since 1980?
I don't know. I've lost count, but I've heard it's something like 10.
It's got to be at least that, which is such a crazy, I can't think of another kind of partnership between a musician and a director that has lasted as long, except maybe like Tim Burton, Danny Elfman, in terms of multiple, you know, and having a signature sound. But the music you're doing for The Irishman, how would you say in any way it might be different than other work you've done on his films?
Well, that's one of the real interesting things of working with Marty over the years on all these movies. Everything has been different. Everything has been something that I go into and I think, oh my God, I have no idea what to do. And then things start to appear and we start kicking some ideas back and forth. And on this one, I had to discover a musicality this story, this movie takes place over many decades, and I had to find a sound, a mood, a flavor that had a timeless quality to it, that it didn't sound like it was stuck in any one of these decades. And you know, and I've said this before, but you know, when I would over the years when I would say to Marty, okay, oh, I think you know, I got a clue. I think I got an idea here, and what if blah 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 blah, and he'd say, oh, that's good, as long as it doesn't sound like movie music. And that eliminates a lot of things.
What does sounding like movie music, what's that, in a cliched sense, what is that?
I think that, you know, what he's referring to is traditional movie music, that when somebody's coming, it goes da-da-da-da, boom, ba, you know, that kind of thing. And he's not being dismissive of traditional movie music. He's just saying, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to make things that works with. And other people do brilliantly, but he's saying it's not what I do.
I see. So we're coming up, I believe, on the 40th anniversary of your partnership. For those watching who don't, can you talk a little bit about the Carnie movie? That's a classic movie, and that was the beginning of your friendship, right? I believe Gary Busey was in that movie.
Yes, he was. Jodie Foster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you become? You were an actor in that, right? Not just music.
Yeah, I was just involved with this project in the very beginning as a producer. I produced The Last Waltz, and then after that, they said, "Oh, we have a," you know, they were sending me scripts of other things that I would like to produce, like Flashdance and.
Wait, what?
Yeah,
you were going to produce Flashdance?
Well, they sent me that script at the time, and I didn't know what to do with that, you know.
I'm trying to imagine, like, your music, like Jennifer Beals, like, dancing and slapping her thighs to your music. Could have been a whole different film.
It could have been, you
That's
know,
hilarious.
a whole different, she would have had different moves in that one.
Why didn't you?
But anyway, they were sending me a lot of scripts, and one of the scripts they sent me was this movie, Carnie. And when I was quite young, I worked in a carnival just in the summer just to make some spending money. And I was fascinated by this world. And it was dangerous, scary, and cool. And I survived it. And then these guys.
When you say survive it, though, do you have any stories of survival of your Carnie days?
Well, you know, I found out quickly that there's some pretty seedy people in this underworld of the traveling carnival. So, but this was a small carnival. You know, that just goes from town to town and everything. And so I worked in that and in one of the joints. And the joints are the things, you know, knock over the milk bottles or throw a dart or a balloon or this kind of stuff. I did that, and I was but I was fascinated by this gypsy lifestyle. These guys come here, they do this, or then they move on, and they go somewhere. And I don't know, I was 14 years old, I think, at this time, and I thought, wow, and they just say goodbye, and they go on to the next place. Look at that. This is so great. And it was probably an early connection, too, to traveling musicians, right? And then I worked at the Canadian National Exhibition in the Midway and this was a much bigger operation. And they had a full-out show of human oddities, which was a nice way of saying it. And they had all the joints, and they had all this stuff. And the guy, when I went there, I said, you know, I worked in a carnival before. I just wanted a job. And he said, okay, maybe, you know. And there was this thing where you hit this thing with a hammer and it goes up and rings the bell, which is impossible to do almost. But anyway, he said, you want to work in that? And I said, no, give me something more interesting. Yeah, I want a better responsibility than that. So he put me in, he gave me a job working with the human oddity people. And they were hard to get along with. And very, very dangerous feeling. And at one point, I had to tell one of these guys, "Don't mess. I carry a knife. Don't mess with me." and I had to stand my ground, but I only lasted like a week. And you got to know sometimes, you know, when to come and when to go, and I knew when to go.
Yeah.
It got that. Yeah, it was crazy, but fascinating too, and it helped just teach me some of this code of the road kind of thing, you know, street smarts and all that stuff. So, and that just led me into a world of music where I needed to use some of those tools.
And then you ended up doing the movie Carnie, which sort of set you on a whole other very interesting career path. So when I started working as a producer, and then, you know, this project had been around a while, and they weren't able to get it off the ground, and so we worked on this story some, and then the director and the writer and the producer, the executive producer on it, said, you should play this part in the movie. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. And they said, no, you're part of the writing. You should play this character. And so I did, and I ended up doing the source music for it and working with the great Alex North, somebody that I thought was just brilliant and wonderful. We had a great time. So anyway, what happened though is I bit off more than I should chew, and I had too many jobs, and shooting this movie, the real life carnies, and the real life human oddity people, and the camera crew, and everybody that was in it, they didn't get along. And I ended up being in the middle of this world. And so people like the cameraman would say, he took my watch. He said it disappeared. He stole it. I know he stole. It was like that. And people were just getting, these carnies were just taking everybody out and everything. And part of that was amazing and extraordinary. But it was all encompassing. And what happened was, at the end of it, I thought, okay, I'm going to go back to music for a while now. This is, you know, I've learned my lesson. But as I mentioned, this was the beginning of your very fruitful 40-year working relationship with Marty, correct?
Well, after I did Carnie, then I worked on the music for Raging Bull.
Right.
And, you know, and him and I figured out something when we were doing The Last Waltz together of, you know, I was a movie bug, and he turned me on to amazing things, and I shared music with him that he had never experienced before. And so we had this trade-off that set something up, and then on Raging Bull, we did something, and we've been doing it ever since.
What is it about your dynamic that has lasted so long and over so many different types of movies, different types of scores, not the same thing, you know, as you mentioned? What is it at the heart of it?
It's a bit mysterious in that there is something in my imagination and understanding something deeply about him and his working process that he kind of thinks, oh, he gets it. You know, he understands something about what I'm trying to do. And likewise, Marty is an executive producer on the documentary once were brothers.
Yep.
So that, we have this trade-off that's ongoing.
Well, I was just about to ask you about that. The title, you mentioned the song is on the album as well. The title is, a little bittersweet. And at the very top of the documentary, which I have seen, it says something like, I actually wrote down the quote, "The kinship you have with your bandmates, your bandmates, was so beautiful, it went up in flames." I wanted to make sure I had that quote right. So explain what you meant by that, because that starts off the movie. It's like right in the first couple minutes, and it's a pretty intense thing to say.
Well, we had one of the most unusual and extraordinary stories of any group in music history. There is nothing comparable to it. And where we started out from, the combination of things, and it's so much to go into. It's almost like you gotta see the movie. But in this relationship and what this documentary is about is really about a lot about the Brotherhood. And we were so locked in, and in a way, in a musicality, and in a personal way, that we invented something that had a big effect on the course of music, because we had been together for several years before we ever made music from Big Pink. So we had done our homework, we had woodshedded, we had honed our skills, we had gathered music from the depths of America and up into Canada, and took it very seriously with respect, of what we were doing. So then when we came to make our first record, Music from Big Pink, when it came out, people were like, "Oh my God, where did this come from? What's going on?" And because it had nothing to do with what was happening in music.
Yeah.
It completely separated itself from the pack. Yeah. And it had nothing to do with us saying, "Well, let's do something different." And those words never came up. We went into a world, into a dimension of music, and all the things that we had gathered over these years, we put it all in our own gumbo and stirred it up. And when we made this music, it was just about the honesty of what we had gathered in this. And so it had such a strong identity. It had such a strong look. It changed the way people were dressing. We were like, "What's going on here?" and then these people came along. Eric Clapton said, "I heard this record. I'm leaving Cream." And I was like, "I don't want that responsibility," And it sent ripples through music and through the culture. And so then we did this next record. And it was unheard of at this time that we were like, "Well, we're not doing this in a studio. We're making our own world, our own atmosphere." And we rented Sammy Davis Jr.'s house up in the Hollywood Hills and turned the pool house into a studio. And it was really just to cut off the world, go in and do what we needed to do. And the music that came out of that cemented the deal. And this group that, was so we want to be pop stars, or we want to be this or that, and it was the opposite of everything. And somehow, again, the honesty in this music and the depth of it, you could hear this sound coming from everybody after that. Yeah. And it was a wonderful feeling, but it had nothing to do with us, with it being a plan. It wasn't a plan at all. And we weren't trendy because we didn't know what the trend was and didn't want to. We were really, again, going into our own world, our own dimension and discovering a musicality, a sound, everything. So when this record came out, it didn't sound like other records. The music, the songs weren't about anything else that anybody was writing about. I wrote a song about the Civil War from the Southern point of view. You know, it was like, you know, and people were like, what made you think of that? And I thought, it's kind of all I could think, you know, it's all I thought of at the time. I don't know the answer to any of those things, except that what seemed like a good idea in that moment. So it went on to have this thing, and then we were on the cover of Time magazine. They never put groups on the cover of Time magazine back then, right?
Then, no.
It was like, whoa.
How were you I'm sorry, I just want to know how you were processing all these things you're telling me about.
But that's the point right there. So now we're going on, and success and everything having its effect on what we had been, on the Brotherhood and everything. And, you know, we're growing up too. So people start going in different directions, some, you know, getting married and having kids and going here and going there. And all of these things, it wasn't the same Brotherhood as it was. And we think, oh, you have to adapt to that. Now, all this is happening in the late 60s and into the 70s. And what was happening in music in that period, it became a very dark cloud that came over. Yeah. And there was a lot of drug experimenting going on. And there was a lot of, let's see how close to the edge we can drive without going over, and a lot of things. And nobody is immune to this. And it ended up having a big effect on our Brotherhood. And it started to break away. And in that, it was a deep sadness to that, but it was part of growing and the whole thing going to a destiny that you never imagined. And some of that was really harmful. And we ended up kind of going like this, and then we came back together again for a culmination of this in The Last Waltz.
So when in the movie Once We Were Brothers, was there anything, based on all the stuff you're telling me, that you watched or revisited when watching the movie that was particularly emotional for you, in a good way or in a tough way?
Well, one of the things about this film that I didn't know that this is where it was going to go is it is extremely moving. It's extremely emotional. And they premiered it the opening night at the Toronto International Film Festival. It's the second biggest film festival in the world. And that was quite an honor. And I thought, oh, you know, and when you work on something, you kind of get lost in the work and everything. And I thought, oh, maybe this is pretty good, right? And when they showed it at the opening, the audience was overwhelmed with emotion. And they just, the reaction to it was extraordinary. And it affected me in this kind of way. And the film is emotional and moving and different than any of these other documentaries. And part of that was from this amazing team that we put together. You know, first of all, I got this young director to do it. He was 24 years old.
Oh, wow.
When I said, I think you're the guy for this.
Oh, wow.
And there was a lot of people, you know, where we could have gone with this. But he was the guy that my manager, Jared Levine, and I thought, let's take a shot with this guy. And then the team that came in, Imagine Entertainment came in on the thing, and Martin Scorsese. And so there was incredible talent around. And the way that all the pieces started fitting together and building, it's really turned into something.
Since we're talking about documentaries and Martin and all this, what did you think of the Rolling Thunder Revue documentary that just came out? And what memories do you have of being on that tour?
I wasn't on that tour.
Were you not?
I went and played when Bob played Madison Square Gardens and went out to the prison to see Hurricane Carter.
Okay.
He called me and said, "You got to come and check this out." So I went to the prison with him, and I sat in on a song that night at Madison Square Gardens. But I didn't do the tour.
You didn't do the tour.
Yeah.
What did you think about the fact? I have my own feelings about this, but there were little. I don't know if I want to call them lies, but there were little, like, if you're in the know, you know, kind of untruths in the Rolling Thunder documentary, which I was duped by.
Oh, it's a complete put on.
I was so fooled. I was.
But
upset.
that's what's great about it.
Okay.
And I mean, well, there's many things that are great about it. But I was watching it, and then I saw Martin, Bette Midler's husband, playing the part of, I know him, and he's playing the part of this guy, the guy who was putting the tour together. Mm-hmm. And I thought, this is incredible.
So
this is a beautiful hoax.
Was there anything in there that you thought was true that you found out later was like a little fib? Because there were 3 that I fell for at the time.
Well, once I recognized him, I knew that everything was up for grabs in this thing. And it just made it fun to me. Yeah. And I talked to Bob about it, and he said that he hadn't seen it yet. So,
no way, really?
So I said, well, I'm not going to give away anything then.
Well, in your documentary, Once We Were Brothers, a good chunk of the early beginning of part of the documentary is about when you went on tour with Bob Dylan, and you really had to have kind of like a punk rock attitude, because how character building was it to go out with him in, I guess, what some people would call like his Judas period or whatever, when he was going electric and playing to crowds that were like openly furious about it, and you just kept doing your job. Like, what are your memories of that? That must be tough.
I had never heard of anything like this before or even since. That's a long time ago. This was in the end of 1965 and the beginning of 1966 that we did this. And we played all over North America, all over Australia, all over Europe. And we got booed every night.
I know.
Every night. And this is unheard of. It's unimaginable. And when you're doing this, after 6 concerts of doing that, you would say to one another, this isn't working out. Maybe we should do something different. Mm-hmm. Nah. This just, it worked the opposite way on us. And we really went to a place of, oh yeah? In your face. Mm-hmm. And Bob was just like, turn up, just turn it up more. So it became a challenge unlike anything imaginable, and we got through it alive. And sometimes it was a little iffy, but
were there ever moments like what was an iffy
there was
moment?
people that stormed the stage in madness and crazy and with scissors, and it was just
scissors.
Oh yeah.
No security. Security wasn't as tight back then.
No, they didn't have security like they.
Oh my God!
But we survived it. We got through it. We came out of that with thicker skin, I'd say.
So it was character building.
That's right.
So what was the vindication when you went out with him years later, playing electric music, of course, and now everyone loves it. Now everyone's on board. Was there any part of you who was like, hey, screw you, or? Was it revengeful?
What it was we didn't change a thing. Mm-hmm. The world changed. Mm-hmm. The world came around. And there was a bold feeling about that. Just to think you were doing something and everybody was wrong and we were right, you know.
It must feel good.
Yeah, kind of.
So let's go back to Sinematic and talk about some specific songs. Obviously, the title, Sinematic, is a pun because your music is cinematic, you work in cinema, but why the S? Like, is this a naughty record? Where's the
Well,
sin?
it just because, you know, there is in there an extreme beautiful darkness, and I like that. I like the noir element to it, and working with Martin Scorsese in this thing and all the stuff that was swimming around while I was making this, you know, it just had that element. There's somewhat of a balance in it too. It isn't, you know, it isn't all violent. Although I was joking with some friends of mine at one time. They were saying, well, what kind of record are you making? And I said, kind of sounds a bit like Peck and Paw rock. And it was like Peck and Paw rock.
I like that.
And I was working with Martin Scorsese, and we're doing a mob movie.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about little sweetheart people. So anyway, all of this stuff seeping in there, and even the art that I did for this that I've never shared before, and for each song.
You want to show? You have some?
Yeah. You want to see it?
Yeah.
All right.
So you did different artwork for different songs.
Yeah. So right away, this is an indication of this isn't going to be sweet, you know. This is, you know.
It's a little dark.
So anyway, for each song, now this is the I Hear You Paint Houses about this mob experience. And so in this art, it's very mixed media. So some of it is I'm mixing my photography with my paintings, with everything goes together. And that has kind of a message right away of where we're going in this. And this is the painting I did of the Brotherhood.
Oh, that's really nice.
You know? And on. This is a song about when I was growing up. It's called Dead End Kid. You know, when I was growing up, they told me, yeah, you're probably not going anywhere and probably end up in prison. And I thought, no, I have big dreams. I'm going to do stuff. And, you know.
Who were the people that told you that?
Well, where I was growing up in Toronto, I had family members that were part of the underworld.
Right.
And so in that thing, there was a 50-50 chance that you could get involved in that and end up in prison. But I was, you know, I was 15 years old and I was saying, no, I'm going to go out in the world and I'm going to write music and I'm going to play music and I'm going to sing songs and I'm going to do all this stuff. And they were like, that doesn't happen for people like us. Aww. And you're going to be disappointed. And I was like, why can't you see it? I can see it. I can feel it. And I followed that path.
And ironically, now you're scoring a movie about the mob. And it's like your 10th movie.
There is some irony in all of this. And this is, there's a song, Walk in Beauty Way, which is a Navajo expression, meaning just living your life the way, in the most beautiful way you can. And there's a painting I did of Walk in Beauty Way. And this is here's a song. Well, it's kind of a rough way of going about this, but it's called Let Love Rain.
That's the song with Glenn Hansard.
Right.
Swell season.
Yeah.
The movie Once. A lot of people would know him from that.
Yeah.
Frames.
Yeah. He's a very talented guy and a great guy. So, and this is this is about this guy made Al Capone look like a lightweight. This Shanghai underworld king, this guy, and I got this song. It's called Shanghai Blues, and I did this painting, you know, in regard to that. And this is wandering souls, and on and on and on. You know, I don't want to take up all your time
No,
with
it's
artwork.
very cool to sit with you while you show the artwork that you did.
So I've never, you know, I've never put this out there before, and even the cover, you know, is...
What made you decide to do it now, too?
Because all this stuff was happening, and while I was recording, we were working on this artwork, and it all just became centered. And so here we are. It's all together. Everything connects.
What was going on besides in your career and in your film work, like in your life or in the outside world politically maybe, that was influencing the tone of the record?
You know, there is something. There's a song on the record called "Praying for Rain," and at some point, you just gotta say, I don't know who you people are that deny science and deny the reality, you know, and don't care about the next generations, but you're just dead wrong, you know. And the way that they talk about water is going to become, you know, the #1 thing that people are going to need in the future, and clean water, and right now, you know, there is people in this administration saying we don't care about clean water, you know. It is so bad.
It's very
you know, and I don't know, and you gotta, so I'm keeping, you know, my Canadian passport handy, you know, because I don't know what's going to happen here, but...
I'm jealous you have one of those.
You know, and they got lots of water up there, too.
There was one song that we didn't talk about just now that I wanted to ask you about, which was Beautiful Madness, because I believe it was inspired by a film that you and Marty both have enjoyed or watched together. It's a movie starring James Mason that I've never heard about.
Bigger Than Life, it's
Bigger
called.
Than Life was the name of
Nicholas
the film.
Ray movie.
Oh, okay.
The great Nicholas Ray.
Yeah.
And, yeah, well, you know, he showed me a bunch of movies that were, you know, that just took you somewhere else. And you didn't even know that anybody would think of an idea of doing that. And it was kind of funny and cool and fascinating to just see that this movie, Bigger Than Life, is about the discovery of cortisone years ago, and it became a miracle drug. And James Mason plays somebody who thinks that, I mean, this drug, you know, makes somebody feel, you know, really good. It's the beginning of the steroid world too. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, he ends up going mad from the effects of doing too much of this good thing.
Is there any parallels to that song and what's going on with the opioid crisis or anything like that right now? Or is there anything topical about doing this song right now?
Yeah, you know, all of this stuff enters your subconscious, and it just comes out in different ways. And even when you think of, you know, I'm in a different place. I'm not going to be writing songs about what people write songs about. You know, I don't know anybody who's writing songs about the subject matters I'm choosing and everything, but you know, I'm not writing many songs about ex-girlfriends. You know, that seems to be quite popular today. Like, all songs are about ex-boyfriends and ex-girlfriends. Yeah. I don't know. It's a little bit wearing.
You kind of, as you mentioned when you were talking about songs that the band did, you kind of never trafficked in those kind of obvious,
I hope not,
lyrical things, which is very cool. I did want to ask you about Let Love Rain, the song with Glenn Hansard, because I did read that there was some kind of Lennon inspiration behind it.
I mentioned John Lennon in the song even.
Okay.
Yeah, because one day I was driving in my car, and the Beatles song, All You Need Is Love, was on. And I kind of smiled to myself thinking, you know, there's a way to look at that there was a certain innocence to it, and it was naive perhaps, and it was all of this stuff, and people thought that was a good thing back then, and then it went away, and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, you know, he wasn't wrong about this. It's good to care for people to care for one another. It's good that love is way up on the top of the list of what really should be felt in this world. And now, if we ever needed it, we need it now. So anyway, I was, you know, I was just wanting to honor that period and that ideal from that time, because I thought that's really good stuff.
It seems like that era, the 60s, the late 60s, you know, we just celebrated the anniversary of Woodstock, etc. It seemed like music really had the ability then to kind of change the political landscape or shift the needle that way. And I mean, I don't see that happening now. I haven't seen that happen in a long time.
Yeah, there's a different momentum in the part that music plays. It was fortunate to be part of a generation that the music was the voice of the generation. And the songs that the band was making, and the songs that Bob Dylan was making, or the Beatles, or everybody, you know, there was a togetherness in it. And then they thought, well, let's, you know, we lived up in Woodstock, New York. It was just the band and Bob Dylan. And then these guys said, we're going to do a music festival, and we're going to call it Woodstock. And it was really because we stirred something up there, a mysterious thing that spread out into the world. And then they had this festival, and this gathering of people, 500,000 people. The world stopped for a moment and said, whoa, wait a minute. This is a lot of young people getting together and saying, we don't like war, and we don't like hate, and we're going to show 500,000 of us getting together in the name of love and peace. Not a terrible thing. No. You know, and on the new band collection, the 50th anniversary collection of the band album, in that we're including the band's concert, our what we did at Woodstock. It's never been released before.
Oh, wow.
And so it's like a bonus thing in that package. And it was funny coming back, hearing that, and going back to that period of time and remembering that moment that we had only played, I think, one job before as the band, before playing in front of 500,000 people. And when we walked out on that stage, and people as far as the eye could see, everywhere in every direction, and it was a stunning sight, a powerful sight. But they were there to party and to rock. And they were out there, they'd been out, you know, and gone through everything and stoned. I don't know what they were doing. But anyway, they were out there, and they were jumping up and down, and yeah, you know. And we went out, and when we played, it was equivalent to doing a set of hymns. And everybody was like, stopping, they weren't jumping anymore, and this spell came over the place.
Good, yeah.
And everybody just went to this, you know, I don't know if it was the right place and time, but everybody went there with us, and this thing came over everybody, and there was something beautiful in that. And then we played our thing, left, And then they went back to jumping up and down, and I want to take you higher.
See, I'm glad I thought you were about to tell me a story similar to your early Dylan tour stories that people were like not feeling it, but you actually, they were feeling it. You won over that crowd, even though you were doing something different.
It did something. It did, it did something. But when it's not what the crowd wants or expecting, for a moment, everybody's kind of out of sync for a moment. Mm-hmm. And then when you see it come together in a way, there's something lovely about that.
Very. So you mentioned at some point during this interview that there were people who maybe didn't believe this was going to be your career path when you were 15, 14, that thought you would not be doing this now, that your dreams were misguided or too big or whatever. So you obviously had a vision and a plan for yourself from a young age, but did you expect that 50 years after Woodstock, more than 50 years after you got your start in music, that you'd still be having such a multifaceted career with all of these things going on at once? Did you see the long plan?
No. I didn't see any plan. And part of that was really trying to be present, trying to be today. And I still feel this way. I wake up in the morning and I think about, what the challenge is today. And what do I need to do to make tomorrow really good? I'm really on that journey, and that's my mission. And I don't think about why, but in 5 years I'm gonna, the artistic challenge in all of this really means being present, and that's the way I was then. I was thinking I had to win over something that was impossible, and everything was impossible over all the years, and it's still impossible.
I don't know if it's impossible. It seems like you can do anything.
I don't know.
Direct a sequel or produce a sequel to Flashdance. Flashdance 2.
Yeah.
You can put that.
Maybe they did.
I don't know if there was a Flashdance.
Maybe I'm too late. I don't know.
It's never too late for a Flashdance 2.
Okay.
But on a serious note, thank you so much. It's been fascinating to talk about all the aspects.
Lindsay, it is terrific talking with you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.